Hey, did you hear over the weekend that Google had delisted 10 of India's most well known apps in terms of non compliance of its policies? Today, I'm going to break down exactly what has happened, what the ramifications are going to be, and what potentially we could see in the future in this video. So, stay tuned to check it out. So, essentially, what had happened was Google had delisted 10 major Indian apps: shaadi.com, bharatmatrimony.com, Kuku FM, Truly Madly, Naukri, and many more. The reason why the Google claimed that they delisted these apps was because they did not adhere to its policies. Now we'll get into much more details regarding what the policies were to kind of give you a context of why that happened. And a lot of the founders of these companies, they came out citing nationalism. Most of it was fake nationalism, to be honest. But they kind of since that seems to be the favor of the day coming in the election cycle, everyone seems to be using that. But keeping the nationalism aside and all the other things, let's look at it from a purely business perspective, right? So over the weekend, a lot of things happened over there, and over the weekend, what they did was they then listed those back. Those apps were listed back on behalf of the government pressure, but there was a slight tweak in terms of how that happened. They were listed back as consumption apps, where the payment function was completely disabled. So, what exactly is happening over here and what the context is? So, essentially, what had happened was Google charges each and every app which is listed on the platform, right? They charge a Google transaction fee. Now, essentially, it's not for each and every app. E-commerce apps are exempted from that. A lot of other payment apps are exempted from that. But for services-based companies, they were supposed to pay 15 to 30% fees to the Google Marketplace for facilitating the Google Discovery platform. And if you don't do that, if you don't fall in that category, and you want to use your own separate payment gateway, then in that case you have to pay around 11 to 25%. Now these are huge numbers of payment fees, right? Especially for a company who's just claiming to they are doing it for payment facilitation. So these are exactly huge numbers, and that is exactly why the dispute is that these companies are saying that these payment charges are huge and obscene, and it should not be charged so much. So essentially, Google is a capitalist company, right? They would obviously charge monies, which what makes sense for their own business, and charge money. So let's think about it. What kind of charges are typically seen in such kind of platforms. Now, essentially, Google being a discovery platform, uh, you would say that since they are a discovery platform where you are getting more visibility to your app, that's why these kind of charges are justified. But at the same time, is it truly a discovery platform in its truest sense? Let's think about it. In my mind, the closest comparison in terms of the facilities which Google provides, it's not Amazon, it's not other e-commerce marketplaces, but it's more in terms of AWS. AWS provides an infrastructure and hosting service, right? Google App Play Store plays something along the similar lines. It provides an infrastructure, it provides facilities for apps which are hosted and gets them listed on the platform, right? And that's why charging 15 to 30% of that is an extremely high amount, especially in a market like India, which is extremely price sensitive. So that is why the comparison doesn't kind of make sense. A lot of the times, if you see, people are comparing with Apple, that they are willing, these same companies, they are willing to adhere to Apple's norms, but they're not willing to adhere to Google's norms. Now, why is that difference? Why are the same companies willing to pay 30% to Apple but not to Google? The difference between Apple and Google is Apple is not just a platform, it's not just an OS, it's a complete device, right? So what Apple says is these are my devices. If you want to list on a platform, you need to pay. If you don't want to list on a platform, you don't pay. So that's a different story. Android is not just Google is not saying that just for its Nexus devices. It is for the entire OS. It is the entire ecosystem which makes it so competitive and so negative, and that is why the huge backlash. And especially in India, where 97% of the phones are on Android, you can imagine the kind of plight which most of these companies would face. So that is why the difference between Apple and Google in this scenario. Now, if you want to compare this with other situations like Amazon.com, right? A lot of people are saying that since Amazon.com is a marketplace, they charge somewhere from 15 to 30% from retailers which are listing on the platform, right? So it's completely fair. The difference between an Amazon store, a Flipkart store, or these kind of stores is people actually check out from directly the Amazon.com store itself. Uh, they act as a pure play marketplace where the products which are listed over there, they get to sell it. However, in the case of the apps, people are not directly buying from the Google App Store. They go inside the app, they utilize the app, and they buy it inside the app, not inside the App Store. So hence the similarity does not align. That is why expecting 15 to 30% revenue share on that completely makes no sense whatsoever as well. So that is what another drawback of this 15 to 30% charge which the Google is levying. Now, if you compare that with other service providers like Book My Show, PVR, IRCTC, and that's what a lot of LinkedIn influencers are kind of using that to justify the charges, right? This again does not make sense whatsoever because these guys are directly providing those services. Google is not directly providing any services over here. Book My Show is a booking platform by itself. PVR is a booking platform by itself. IRCTC is booking the train tickets. That is an actual service provider themselves which is doing that. And that again, that's why it makes no sense to compare that with the Google Play Store. Another comparisons are Ola, Uber, Swiggy, Zomato, right? Again, these guys are pure play discovery platforms and people are directly paying to those platforms. The other guys, they simply list it. They are not responsible for conversion. In this case, for example, in Ola, Uber, the taxi drivers which are there, the restaurants which are there, they are not responsible for conversion. The responsibility for conversion is in the hands of Ola, Uber, or Swiggy or Zomato. That's why they can charge high commission fees over there because they are taking care of the marketing which is required to convert the customer. In the case of the Google Play Store, that's not the case. Google Play Store does not do the job of conversion. The job of conversion is done by the apps themselves, and that is why charging 15 to 30% is extremely prohibitive. So, what could a reasonable charge over here should be? Ideally, if you personally ask me, I think the reasonable estimate would be that it should be considered more like a platform, like an AWS platform, and they charge for hosting services. There could be multiple ways in terms of the number of hosting capabilities that they are using, or in terms of the number of users that are signed up, in terms of daily, monthly active users which are there. That could be one payment model because typically that's how most infrastructure companies operate. That they charge for the infrastructure, not as a percentage of revenue, and that's a logical step which makes sense. That is something which would be extremely something which would be comfortable with all the companies because imagine a company which makes 100 CR in revenue through the apps and paying 15 crores to 30 crores out of that to the Google Play Store for that, for which they did not have much role to kind of provide that. So that becomes extremely untenable in terms of the comparison over there. At the same time, another alternative would be if they actually want to do payment charge over there, it could be a significantly smaller number, something like 5 to 10%, where the impact would not be that much, and this would be including the payment gateway charges. That could be something which could be feasible, that could be somewhat manageable, and that can be something which can be figured out. But 15 to 30% in a cost sensitive market like India is absolutely untenable. That is what, in my assumption, what the realistic charges should be for the Google Play Store. Not sure if the Google would agree to that or not. Only coming time will tell. But essentially, this is what I think what the major areas should be. Now, what are going to be the political ramifications for this? Now, over the weekend, they were under a lot of political pressure as well. They had to reinstate those apps. But what they have done is they've reinstated the apps at least. But what has happened is they are not allowing payments. So if you go to a Naukri on your mobile app, if you open a Kuku or a Bharat Matrimony on your mobile app, you cannot actually do the payments over there, and that will create a huge friction over there. So this is going to create a very bad experience for the app users as well as for the Play Store themselves as well. So this is not going to serve anybody because what this is going to do is this is also going to reduce the revenue not just for the apps but even for the Play Store, because essentially if that number goes down, the Play Store will automatically make less money, and the ecosystem will automatically, people will stop using their ecosystem and they'll start moving on to other ecosystems. So that itself is not a very a sound business decision in my mind. And if you look at it from the overall perspective, the Google is utilizing its monopolistic tendencies, right? Because if there are any other app ecosystems which are out there, any other apps are out there, Google does not allow them to list on the platform. So essentially, you have no choice but to use the Google Play Store. So that is also a part of a very anti-competitive kind of practice which is done, which is detrimental to what the ecosystem should be overall, where you have to ensure that there are good competition systems in place. Now, what this entire thing has done is it has done a lot of political ramifications for Google. It has generated a lot of negative PR, not just among the startup ecosystem, but also within the government as well. Because even the government has taken this very seriously and they immediately asked these companies to reinstate those apps. So this could be a potential very long-term drawback, negative decision for the company as well. Because what's going to happen going forward is you've seen the developments which have happened in the India, right? We had first the India stack which was set up for enabling digital verification. Then we had Aadhaar. India stack was essentially Aadhaar. Then you had UPI, which completely transformed the payment system, and it's an innovation which is not seen anywhere across the world. And with UPI came the RuPay payment system, which has put Visa and Mastercard completely on the back foot, and they've been trying to lobby using the US government within India to kind of push their own products, but they've been struggling ever since UPI has come out. So that creates a lot of problem over there. And now with ONDC, the e-commerce marketplace is completely opened up. So this leaves an opportunity where the Indian government themselves can create a separate entity which can create an entire OS, not just a Play Store. So a lot of people are saying that create an own Play Store and start using that. But the fact is, if you cannot install the new OS, if you cannot install the new Play Store, how will you actually install the apps? You need it at the OS level. To do it at the OS level, if the Indian government comes up with a new OS and makes it mandatory for all the new phones to use that OS, that could become a serious competition killer for Google itself. So with the current move that it has done, it has seriously ticked off the government as well, which might be a bad long-term move for them in the long term. And if the Indian government decides to create their own OS and makes it mandatory for all Indian phones to have that OS, that could be a potential problem for them. So that is why it becomes a huge problem. And as I've already given you the example of Visa and Mastercard, that's an issue. Now, one more example which a lot of LinkedIn influencers are saying is that because Google is offering this service for free for lakhs of other developers who are listing their products on the platform, these few small companies have to pay for that. So it's not that big a deal. Now the question is, why should these select companies foot the bill for the rest of the lakhs of the developers? Is this really unfair? Is this really a pure capitalist situation where a few companies are forced to pay for the rest of the 100,000 developers who don't have to pay? Number one. Number two, all the other free to use apps which are listed freely on the Play Store, right? Google monetizes them with the help of AdSense, and that is where Google makes its money. So essentially, even though they are listed on free and the developers don't have to pay anything, Google has a way to monetize that, and Google makes majority of its money through AdSense and its ad product. So essentially, Google is not doing any charity for them. Google is asking them to pay for that as well. So that is why, in the bigger scope of things, if you actually look at it, those free apps, Google has tremendous ways to monetize it, and that is why expecting to put the burden on just these handful of apps for the entire ecosystem is completely unfair. So these are my thoughts on what has happened over the last weekend, and this is something which can seriously shake up the Indian digital startup ecosystem with the possibility of a new mobile OS kind of coming in. We'll see in the future coming weeks and months how the things go. But this is something which I felt that Google has taken a wrong step over here, and this could seriously cause them long term, in terms of operating India. So I hope you like this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. What do you think? What the future aspects of this could be? If I've missed anything, let me know in the comments below. And if you like this video, please share this to your friends. Subscribe this, click on the bell icon so that you ensure that you do not miss any of my future videos. So hopefully you enjoyed that. See you soon. Bye bye.